back to the Childhood Cancer Perspective, and thank you everybody for sticking with me as I continue to share the journey of so many other families after also sharing the journey of our daughter JC, diagnosed with a very rare form of brain cancer in January of 2020. I've talked about it before that social media is one of those things that is a love-hate relationship, and it really a lot of times leans on the hate side, but the love side is that we get to meet really cool people and really cool families, and I like to be able to share their stories. And so that is what we're going to do today. So my guest is Kim. She is the mother of Big K, and she's going to tell us about her and their journey and just give us all the information we ever wanted to know and maybe didn't know about, I believe, Hodgkin's lymphoma. So, Kim, the floor is yours.
Alrighty, well, so in I guess December of 2023, she called us. My husband had gone. He was coming home from work. Little Kay had speech therapy, and so we were both gone. She called us up and said, "Hey, I've got a really bad nosebleed. Can't get it to stop." And stuff like that. And so we didn't think much about it. She'd had nosebleeds before in the past. Only two of them, this being the second one, had only ever required us to go to the ER to just kind of help get it to stop. Of course, they did lab work and all of that stuff, came back that she was a little bit anemic, but that was the only lab that came back anywhere abnormal and stuff. And so we followed up with her pediatrician the next week, started her on some iron and things like that, and then scheduled an appointment in May to follow up, kind of give that iron some time to work. Between January, when we met with the doctor, and May for her follow-up, she had just some one-offs, didn't think anything about it. Some headaches, some nausea, some vomiting, but they always just seemed to coincide with when there was a stomach bug going around, or when, the seasons were kind of changing, some sinus, allergies, things like that. Everybody says that itchy skin is a symptom of lymphoma. Well, problem with that is that she has eczema. So we didn't realize, that the itchy skin was really, at that point in time, was more of a symptom of the lymphoma, not the eczema. Her one medication that she was on did stop working. Maybe that was a clue going, hey, this is more than, the eczema. So we did switch her medication right before, a couple of weeks before her doctor's appointment in May 13th, 2024, we took her in for her follow-up. We did some additional labs. Iron was not necessarily worse, but it hadn't gotten any better after being on iron for 4 months or so. So we switched up her iron, but there were some other just abnormalities, but nothing was screaming at that point, hey, this is cancer. White blood cells weren't crazy, nothing was just kind of screaming anything. But then she did bring up, hey, I'm having some trouble breathing. And so her doctor was like, well, let's just do a chest x-ray. Let's just see, if there's anything there. It did come back showing clear. We'll kind of backtrack to that a little bit later on. But at the time, it did show clear. And so they said, well, we'll just we'll watch it, we'll follow up and things like that. And then in June, Sunday before Father's Day, we were doing a practice flight for the U.S. Nationals the U.S. Nationals balloon race with one of the pilots. The pilot that I was working with, he said, yeah, bring her on. She can help us out. I kind of noticed she was starting to struggle a little bit with things that she hadn't normally struggled with crewing for the balloons and stuff like that. She went home and she was just wiped. Was really tired, so she just pretty much slept the rest of that day. The next day she went for her sports physical for school. They passed her, but they said, your heart rate, just sitting here is teetering between 99 and 110, just sitting here. They were like, so you need to, follow up. So we actually got her in the next day with her pediatrician, did some more labs, did some pathology, things like that. And of course, everything at that point in time really did start coming back abnormal. But again, nothing was just like, hey, it's cancer. You need to check this. You need to check that. So the rest of that week, she just kind of was just not herself, but she was still able to function. Father's Day, we celebrated with my husband and everything. And then she went down to her grandmother's house. And then for the week, there was one day where her blood pressure was really low. Like she just told her grandmother, I don't feel good. Grandmother took her blood pressure. It was really low. So they said, why don't you go just lay down, take a shower, cool off, kind of thing, because she had been up and moving around in a back room that didn't have a whole lot of airflow um, and stuff. And then by the time she got back, we could just look at her, and she had developed some really bad nausea and vomiting, just couldn't keep anything down. When she got back, I could tell just looking at her that she had lost weight while she was gone. Her eyes were sunken in. She had really dark circles under her eyes, and I just like something's wrong. So from the lab work that we had done the week before she went to her grandmother, her doctor was like, we need to go see a hematologist. She's like, I've done as much as I can as a pediatrician here, but she was thinking that it was some sort of like iron deficiency metabolic disorder, something. She was like, I can't do anything more. Go see a hematologist when you can. There was no rush to it. It was just a, hey, when you get the chance, maybe sooner rather than later, but not drop everything and go now kind of thing. So we actually had that one, we got that scheduled for June 26th of 2024. So the week after she got back from her grandmother's. So when she got back from her grandmother's, we knew something was wrong, but it was like, well, we have a doctor's appointment coming up in a couple of days. There's no point in rushing to do anything right now. June 24th, my husband went back to work for the first time since she had come home. He had been kind of keeping them up, in the loop and everything because he works in the ER. And they were like, something just doesn't sound right. Go get her, bring her home, or go home, get her, and bring her to us. And we'll just do a full workup. And so he called me. It was about a 45-minute drive from his work back home. So I told her, I was like, hey, put on some comfy clothes. Daddy's coming to get you. And she laid down on my leg. And that was the first time. And I knew something wasn't right then because she laid down and I could feel the heat through my pant legs. So I had sister go get the thermometer and she was running 102. Now, this was the first time she had popped a fever in over a year. When she was little, she had croup a whole lot, but she had been relatively healthy from probably about age 8 on. She was 14 when she had that nosebleed. She was 15 at this point in time when all of this was going on. So he gets her, he sends her on, or they go on to the ER. Because they were waiting on her, they already had labs ready to go. They just had to get her checked in and triaged. And as soon as they did that, they were drawing labs. They sent her for a chest x-ray. And that chest x-ray we had done May 13th, that was clear. Now her chest was just completely whited out and clouded, and they could tell that there was a mass kind of back behind her heart and lungs. So they did a CT scan. Now, of course, he's texting me what's going on, and I turned to Dr. Google. Probably should not have, but I did. And so I was typing in all of her symptoms, going, you know what? She's had some night sweats. She's had some weight loss. Now, again, she's a teenage girl. So some of that weight loss was intentional because the school she was at, she was one of the, not that she was big, but she was one of the bigger girls. And so, of course, teenage girls are mean when it comes to weight. So some of that weight loss was intentional. We just didn't realize how much weight she had really lost up until that week before when she got back from her grandmother's house. So I'm Googling all of that, plus, swollen lymph nodes or mass in the chest. And so I sent him a text message and I was like, it's lymphoma. And he was like, no, they haven't come back and said anything like that. And I go, Mama's gut is saying it's lymphoma of some sort. Now, why I didn't just start throwing stuff in bags, I don't know. But I think I was a little bit in shock of going, wait a minute, my child may have cancer. He calls me about 5 minutes later and he goes, that's what they're thinking. They've already called Children's. The Children's is now going to be waiting on us and everything. So I wake up, little K. My dad comes over to drive us. I just throw a whole bunch of crap in bags. I don't know what I'm throwing in, clothes, everything. Because I'm like, okay, I don't know how long we're going to be there. I don't know where we're facing, stuff like that. So we get to the ER where they're at probably about 5 minutes before the ambulance shows up. And we leave our ER around 1 a.m. We get to Children's just around 3. We go straight up to her room. I've never come in. The only time that I'd ever been to that ER was in January of 2015, and we'd come in through the front doors. So I didn't know where we were in the hospital. I'm still, those words are just running through my ears, going, my kid has cancer. My kid, like, how did we get here? But at the same time, I was like, well, fortunately, unfortunately, I can immediately turn to 3 local families who have done this with their children. I did also, on a whim, don't know why, sent Amy a message here on TikTok going, this is what we're looking at. Didn't necessarily expect her to respond back, but it was just somebody else that I knew that I could reach out to. We get to the hospital around 3 that morning, and then we just have about a 13-hour carousel of people. Doctor comes in, she's like, yeah, I think this is it. She's like, but walk me backwards. How did you get to this point? She was able to pull up that x-ray from May, and she goes, it's there, but because they were looking more for breathing problems, they didn't necessarily catch that it was potentially camouflaged back behind the heart and lungs at the time. She goes, it's there. And then we were able to walk it all the way back to that nosebleed in December of 23. So 6 months prior, we could walk it back to, kind of thing. So then it was just kind of a hurry up and wait kind of thing. Once we got there, they did a neck ultrasound to see if there was any lymph nodes in her neck that were viable for biopsy, because they didn't want to stick a chest into her chest or they didn't want to stick a needle into her chest if they could avoid it. So on that Tuesday, the 25th, we had a neck ultrasound. We had an echo. We ended up with 2 units of blood, because at that point in time, her hemoglobin was like 6 point something. White blood cells, obviously at that point in time, had started, had really jumped, and stuff. Then Wednesday, they did the biopsy. They had pathology sitting there, going, okay, if we can confirm 100% that we'll go ahead and put in her port. That pathology came back at about 50. They were like, well, some of it is, and some of it, some of her cells are acting like it's cancer and some of them aren't. So her doctor didn't feel like at that point the risk of cutting was high enough, or like the percentage of how the pathologist was reading it. She didn't want to cut and risk the chance of infection in a cut that didn't need to be there. So then Thursday, that morning, we had our PET scan, and when we got it back and we saw it light up, she was like, and by the time our doctor came in with pathology and radiology, she had gotten the official diagnosis, typing, staging, all of that. She pulled up the PET scan, and like just this massive glow in the dark mass right there in our daughter's chest. And we're just like, well, no wonder she's having trouble breathing. Like everything's just compressed. Official diagnosis was Hodgkin's lymphoma stage 3B. The 3 came because it was down in her spleen. The B was because she had the fever and the night sweats and the weight loss. So that just made it a little bit more aggressive with the B symptoms. And then Friday the 28th, Friday the 28th, we had her port placed that morning, and that night we started chemo. So it was a whirlwind. And then we had 5 straight days of chemo there in the hospital, and then we were discharged July 2nd, and then she got a little bit of a break, and then July 5th we were right back up there for our next dose of chemo. So rounds, she had 6 total rounds of chemo. Rounds 1 and 2 were identical. Days 1 through 5, she had etoposide. Also on day 1, she had brentuximab and doxorubicin. Day 7, she had just brentuximab. Day 14 was Brentux and doxorubicin. And then the next week we had a week off for just labs. We had a follow-up echo after round 1 just to kind of check to see what the doxorubicin was doing to her heart. Didn't have any issues then. Round 2, we did have to push back a week because we didn't make counts. Her ANC was 360. They wanted 750. So we had to push it back a week. And then also round 2, we ended up in the hospital. She popped a fever. Her ANC was 20. Her white blood cells were almost gone kind of thing. Hemoglobin was really low. So we ended up with another blood transfusion. We were in the hospital for 5 days. And then we came home. She missed the first month of school. in person, which was really hard because she was going to a new school. I'm sorry. All of this, like, we're getting close to that 1 year mark, and everything's just kind of hitting. So we enrolled her in homebound school. So she did that for the first month. So of course she had that whole, like, as a teenage girl, she's like, I don't have any hair. I'm going to this brand new school where I don't know anybody. I'm coming in late. Not only am I coming in late, but I'm coming in late with no hair and I'm sick. And, just that was a big mental toll for her, which as parents was hard. But in August, after round 2, we did a repeat PET scan, and that mass in her chest was gone. Like, there was just a little bit glowing, but compared to where it was, her Duval score went from a 5 to a 3, which some hospitals consider that remission. We didn't, declare it at that point, but her spleen was still, not very happy. So then we moved on to round 3. Again, round 3, we had to push back a week because of her counts. But then rounds 3 through 6 were slightly different. We traded doxorubicin and etoposide for dacarbazine and cyclophosphamide. We kept the brentuximab. So days 1 through 3, she had the etoposide. Day 1, we had dacarbazine and brentuximab as well. Day 7, she had brentuximab and dacarbazine. No, sorry, brentuximab and cyclophosphamide. And then we had 2 weeks off where we just did labs. October is when things really just started taking weird turns with weird side effects. He developed steroid-induced hyperglycemia because she was taking strong doses of steroids, on for 15 days, off for 13. And we were in clinic one day and her glucose came back at almost 400. And all she had was a Big Red on the way to clinic that morning. So nothing crazy, hadn't gone crazy the day before. They checked it a little bit later on and it had actually gone up, and she had not eaten anything at that point. So we switched out her fluids to just straight saline, and that did bring it down a little bit. We ended up seeing endocrinology the next day. That was when endo joined our team. And they put her on a sliding scale for insulin. But she had also developed a prolonged QTC, so they pulled her off Zofran, and that was when cardiology really got involved. So since October, she has had an echo every single month just to check on the heart function and things like that. It is going back and forth. We finally did back in March. April. April, we decided to go ahead and put her on some medication, just to kind of help strengthen the heart. We'll watch it until about October when we do another echo. So anytime she was on the steroids, though, after October, we had to watch really closely, check her blood sugars, and do a lot of insulin, sliding scales on the insulin. All of that really started about day 3 of her steroids. So from day 3, probably until about day 18, even after coming off the steroids, we were having to check her blood sugars. October, she landed back in the hospital, but this time it was for hypothermia. Body temp dropped down to 95.5. ANC was low, things like that. So we went back in there, spent 3.5 days in the hospital. For that, I finally got her body temp up. Counts came up a little bit and stuff like that. But now so that was October. November was fairly smooth. December 11th, she had her last chemo treatment. December 19th, she took her last steroid. And then January 13th, she had her third PET scan. It did come back about the same as what it had in August. And so they had to send it over for a second opinion because the first read said that there was potential for radiation that was going to be needed. Second opinion came back and said it was scar tissue. I trust her doctor. I'm not real sure if I trust the radiologist, but at this point, they're not going to redo a PET scan unless they absolutely have to. So we're just watching. Her doctor did say that if any of her labs come back abnormal, or if she has any of those one-off symptoms that she had before, we would run labs. They would get us back in. They'd put us back in at least for a CT scan, or at least for a chest x-ray. If that came back clear, but labs were really off, then we would do a CT scan and kind of go from there. So we're on the up and up. Finally, though, after the second opinion, they said scar tissue. They did officially declare remission on January 19th, 17th, January 17th. So from that Friday or Monday to that Friday, my husband and I were just sitting there going, we're going to have to do radiation. We're going to have to tell her that we're going to have to do radiation. And so when they told us it was just scar tissue and that she was in remission, it was a huge weight off of our shoulders. But at the same time, it was like, what if they're wrong? What if it's not scar tissue? But again, like I said, I trust her doctor. Not so sure about the radiologist, but I don't look at I don't look at scans. So since then, we're still doing monthly labs. We've gone to clinic. May is actually the first month where we're not going to have to go back to clinic. They did move us to every other month in April after she rang the bell. We don't see our doctor again until mid-June, but we are going to do lab work here actually next week. So she did have a chest x-ray last week, but again, it was because she had a really bad cough and there was some trouble breathing. And so we were like, well, we've done this song and dance. Let's see what we're looking at. They did go over it with a more fine-tooth comb. They said that they didn't see anything. We'll compare labs this week to that chest x-ray, and then we'll kind of go from there. Her oncologist is in the loop with this, and we do already have a 6-month x-ray scheduled for next month, so we'll compare that to this. So that's kind of where we're at.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. There's a lot, but I'm, first of all, congratulations on the fact that she rang the bell and is where she is now, because there's so much when if we go back and listen to the story from the beginning, there's so much that comes out of the misdiagnosis or the missed signs or the missed whatever, the things that it takes to get to where you are. It seems like it's such a long road. The one thing that I wanted that you said, and it caught my ear really quick, was something that actually I spoke to Dean Crow about, and that's to always trust your mama gut. And you did that. Whatever is going on with your child, no matter what doctors say, no matter what tests say, you know what's right and wrong with your kid, and you should always trust that no matter what. And yeah, we're not supposed to Google search. We're not supposed to WebMD it. We're not. That's a no-no, but we're going to, because we're human and we just have that human nature to want to know what's happening. So that I'm glad that you did. I mean, I'm not glad of what it produced, obviously, to know that answer, but when you have an answer, you know how to fight now. And so that's incredible. So I'm glad that you trusted that. I'm glad that you knew what was coming and you were able to kind of attack it in that way. The like I said in the beginning too, also the misdiagnosis or the missed signs, the scans where something might be there but nobody saw it when they're not looking for it. It is so common. It's you're looking for the horses and not the zebras, right? You're looking for the one common thing all the time. Again, with our daughter, it was severe constipation and arm pain, and that doesn't scream cancer, right?
Right.
Much like itchy skin or a cough or anything like that. But if you go and once you start doing these searches, you realize all these symptoms line up, and you can sit there and check a box one by one by one by one. Unfortunately, and maybe fortunately, depending on how you look at it, most doctors aren't immediately jumping to that furthest, from what you're sitting at, saying all of a sudden it's cancer. It can be anything else. Unfortunately, I guess on that side of it is that not many of them are looking for that or looking to go that far and have that option on the table. And that's why I think it just takes way too long for us to get the diagnosis that we need. And then we're left kind of playing catch up when it comes to treatments. And a lot of the times these treatments have to come in hard and fast. And these drugs, you mentioned a couple of them. Anybody that's listened to this podcast before or has any kind of understanding of some of these drugs, doxorubicin has a nickname. And it's not a nice nickname. It's called the Red Devil. And these chemotherapy drugs, the way that they are produced and what they're meant to do is essentially destroy everything in its path, to start you over from scratch. That's the point of it. There's no more detailed explanation to what that is. And so when you sit down and you really think about what these kids go through, and seeing it firsthand as a parent is something that I really don't wish upon anybody. I don't want anybody to know that. I want you to know that it's real, but I don't want anybody to understand it, truly. Now, you talked about some of the side effects. Were there any super severe side effects that happened during the chemo treatments that caused changes to happen? And what has been said to you as far as what long-term side effects can be from the treatments that she received?
One that I didn't mention that I just kind of did think about was the neuropathy. She developed neuropathy probably within the first 3 or 4 weeks. She was put on gabapentin for that. She's still on gabapentin. And, of course, 95% of these kids will have lasting effects. We don't know if the neuropathy is going to go away or if it's going to be something that, is going to be forever. It mainly affects her feet and legs. And oddly enough, just because she is who she is and has the weird side effects, I guess I should say, it affects her tongue. Her tongue will start to tingle and go numb every once in a while. And she'll just like, we'll look over and she's just sticking her tongue out. And we're like, what are you doing? And she goes, I'm just making sure it's still there. And we're like, child, you are 16 years old. You still have a tongue. You still have a tongue. It has affected some of her mobility. She did have to go through months of physical therapy. She is one of the few at school that has an elevator pass, because going up the stairs, she's fine, but going down the stairs is when she really has a problem. She can't always feel the step, kind of thing. So she's got an elevator pass. The other day, it kind of came out of nowhere, and all of a sudden, she's just walking back to class and she falls, because all of a sudden there was just her leg just completely gave out and went numb and it was tingling. And thankfully the nurse was right there and called us and we got her in. And then they ran stroke protocol because of the sudden onset weakness on one side of the body. That was extremely scary as well, because you're just like, she's a child. Stroke protocol are words that, just like your child has cancer, are just words that a parent shouldn't ever have to hear. Thankfully, that all came back clear. I mean, and they went over that with a fine tooth comb. They didn't see any masses or growths or anything in that CT scan that would cause concern. So they're thinking that was just a really bad neuropathy flare up. One of the things that, maybe with her being an older child, in that teenage, adolescent age range, one of the things that we had to think about and we're still thinking about and we're going to meet with is her fertility. We know that, these drugs can make it really, really hard for her fertility later on. Of course, she wants children. And at 16 years old, she's, well, 15 going through treatment. Even then, she was old enough to understand that this could affect her later on, beyond, I know you've said it before, beyond the 5 years, because I mean, in 5 years from now, she's only going to be, 20, 21 kind of thing. Hopefully she's going through nursing school like she wants to do, and not necessarily at that point in time thinking about children, but knowing that she wants to have them one day. So we're going to meet with fertility in June, do some testing, kind of see where we're at, because because we were behind the 8 ball and trying to play catch up. Egg retrieval was not something that we even discussed at the time, because we had to hit it hard and we had to hit it fast, kind of thing. I've read other people who have said that it takes them like 2 or 3 weeks to get started, even after they get the diagnosis to get their port in. And then it takes them a week to get chemo started. And I'm just like, maybe we were just, I don't know, maybe we were pushed through because of how hard and heavy we had to hit it at the beginning. Because, yeah, we got there on a Tuesday and we started chemo on Friday, kind of thing. Thankfully, the hyperglycemia, now that we're not on the steroids anymore, that does seem to have resolved itself. So Endo did actually roll us off of their services, and they did say if she ever needed steroids again, they would come back on as needed there. So the hyperglycemia has corrected itself. Cardiac, she's going to be followed by cardio for a very long time with the cardiomyopathy and the prolonged QTC and, things like that. We're hoping to see improvement in October. With that echo, after some of this medication has had time to work that we put her on, and then just being that much further out from the doxorubicin, because at that point in time it'll have been 13 months outside of the doxorubicin. And then she was told at the beginning 2 to 3 weeks for her hair to start falling out. Day 12, 12 days after her first chemo, she started brushing her hair and just walked out of the bathroom with a hairbrush and a clump of hair and tears. It was something that she was so at the beginning in the hospital, she's like, I'm just going to shave my head. I'm done. I don't want to do it. If I'm going to lose it, I'm going to lose it now. We talked her off that ledge a little bit. But then when it came down to actually losing her hair and seeing it, it was a little bit harder. So thankfully, we've got a really good friend who's a hairdresser, let us come in. We did a private session in her studio. It took about an hour and a half, start to finish. We left. We cried. We did funny hairstyles in the process of, shaving it all off. So we made it as fun, as we could, kind of thing. But in the end, when she made that last shave, she looked in the mirror and she was like, well, that's that, kind of thing. Because she didn't want to do this body, splotchy hair. She was like, it's all or nothing for her. She didn't want to do anything, I guess, half-ass. She's never done anything half-ass. She's always been all or nothing. When we told her at the beginning, you're 15 years old. Unfortunately, you're going to understand a lot more of this than younger kids. Fortunately, though, at the same time, you're going to understand this a lot more than some of the younger kids. You're going to understand why they're having to jab that 1-inch needle into your chest. You're going to understand why you feel like crap. You're going to understand that these nurses aren't the enemy. Coming in and giving you these medications that make you feel like dirt. But at the same time, you're old enough and this is going to be something that you're going to remember forever. And so she's going to use that. She's going to channel that. And through this process, she has landed on the direction in which she wants to go when she's older. And she wants to do pediatric oncology. She wants to nursing in the day hospital where they give the chemo. Because she's like, who else other than somebody who has gone through that, who can show them that scar where that port was and say, I have sat in this chair, I've had those drugs, and I've come out the other side, and it's something that the nurses, we've had great nurses. I can't say anything bad about probably 99% of them. You always have that one, I feel like. Thankfully, we only had her once, but I can't judge her off of one day. I don't know what happened in the room before us. I don't know what happened the day before, but they have been there. They have held our hands. They have been our shoulders to cry on. They've been our ears to listen, voices of encouragement, and child life. We could not have done it without child life either. I didn't even know what child life was until June of last year. And she has learned so much from child life. She's learned to crochet. We had one child life specialist, we'll call him H. He came in when she was feeling good and would bring in a crochet kit and they would work on it. She would bring it back the next week and they would keep working on it. She only made it as far as like a little hot pad, not the blanket she was set out to do, but she's like, I made a hot pad kind of thing. So, but it has helped her develop and figure out what path she really wants to go down. She's always wanted to do something in the medical since she was 3. She's kind of bounced around, but she's like, okay. And so now she's looking at schools that do nursing. One of the ones she's looking at, I'll just go ahead and call it out. She's looking at Baylor. They do 2 years in Waco for their nursing. They do 2 years in Dallas for nursing. And so with her wanting to work at Children's, she's like, why not? Her doctor has also said within the next year or 2 that she can come up and she can shadow it, see it from the inside. She's like, you've seen it as a patient. You know the good, the bad, and the ugly. You've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. You've experienced the good, the bad, and the ugly. You've experienced wins. You've experienced losses. So, why not come in, shadow me for a day or 2 over the next couple of years? And then she's like, and when you get done, I've got a spot for you, So that's kind of where we're at. I don't know if that answered your question or not. But so yeah, there's some of the drugs, we have seen the side effects of some of the drugs. We know that there's potential lasting side effects of the drugs and stuff like that, because even though she was 15 at the time, and more, I guess, quote unquote, adult sized, her body is not developed as an adult yet. She's still growing. She's still maturing. And the protocol that she was on is one of the newer protocols for Hodgkin's lymphoma. So there's not a whole lot of data out there as far as like what, the odds of relapse in Hodgkin's is low, but it's never 0. We do also know that the side effects of a couple of these drugs is secondary cancer. And a lot of that is leukemia. And since she's already had a blood cancer, the odds of having another blood cancer with that secondary cancer is a little bit higher for her than it would be if if she didn't already have a blood cancer. So there's always that thought in the back of my head and things like that. And then, with her having a cough last week and having some difficulty breathing. And I was like, well, we've done this song and dance. And we had that chest x-ray last week. I dropped her off at school and just sat in my car and cried. We can't do this again. We will if we have to, but we can't. I don't want to. So, of course, every time my phone buzzed or my watch dinged, I was stalking my chart, which I'm tired of my chart. It's good and bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I'm guilty of that too, by the way. That was I know that just on that topic alone, when we were in for JC stem cells, they would come in, they would draw the blood, they would draw the labs in the middle of the night. And about 6 in the morning, we would have the results, and I'd have it before they came in for rounds. And my phone would go off, and I'd be like, "Holy hell! The ANC is starting to go up, or it's starting to work." And it would be just 1/10 of a point, and I didn't care because it was moving, and I could check it. So I'm 100% guilty of that. We're so attached to that digital side of everything now that we have at our fingertips everything we're looking for, and sometimes the stuff we don't want. I know that, going through this process and going through this journey, or shit show, as my wife will call it, once that diagnosis comes, right? A cough, a bruise, a headache, it's never just those things anymore. Your life, your mindset is forever changed, no matter what happens. That also gets projected onto our other kids too. Anything, it's a complete freak out. And for me, I know that, when JC was sick, I put it off a lot. Like, I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to accept it. I didn't want to come to that. I didn't want to be those people on the commercial. I didn't want that. There's no way in hell that was going to be us. And so even now, when, one of the other kids, if they get a headache or they get sick or something like that, I will get that look from my wife. And I say, absolutely not. We're absolutely not. We're not going to go there right now. We're just going to take a breath, and we're going to let it play out, and we're going to see what's going on, because we can't go to that right away. But unfortunately, our minds kind of do that.
oh yeah. A couple of weeks ago, little Kay woke up saying her tummy didn't feel good. Well, with her having a feeding tube, she can sometimes get gas, trapped in her belly and stuff like that. So we kind of did our pushing around, and she said that she felt better. She went to school. Her teacher sent me a message going, she's just really lethargic. She's really tired. Saying her tummy hurts, saying her head hurts. She's like, but I think she's really trying to push through to get to this field trip, because they were going to a trampoline park that afternoon. I was like, okay, well, if it gets really bad, I'll come get her. She made it through. She got off the bus that afternoon, and I could tell she just didn't feel good. She came in, she threw up, and then she laid her head down on my leg. And again, I could feel that temp. And my brain immediately, then I started noticing every bruise on her legs. I was like, was that there before? How long has she had that? Where did that one come from? And then, kid you not, I turned on my flashlight and I started looking for petechia. And then we got, scheduled an appointment for, the next morning, 10:45 the next morning. And I was like, thankfully, my pediatrician's not going to think that I'm completely insane for making this appointment. And in fact, she told me the next day, she goes, if this had been a year ago before everything had gone down with Big Sister, you wouldn't have done this. She's like, I know where you're coming from. I know why you're doing this. And she's like, and we'll order some lab work. When her iron came back extremely low, her hemoglobin was fine, but her iron was extremely low. And I was just like, again, my brain just immediately started spiraling. And I was like, can we do this again with another child who has already gone through epilepsy and has a feeding tube and developmental delays and is emotionally that of, a 5-year-old, even though she's 12. It's just like, I don't even know how we would explain that to her, kind of thing. So again, now she's on iron, and we're going to redraw labs in a couple months, but my brain is just still in that whole, spiral mode. And it's like, she's not even the one who had this. So yeah, it affects, your thought process as a parent, even for your non-cancer child. I was like, is this my life now? Like, is a fever going to cause me to go spiraling down a hill? Apparently it is my life.
Yeah. It's the unfortunate side effect, honestly, of all of this, is that our brains are trained to, after that diagnosis, it goes from being able to kind of rationalize it to all of a sudden it's worst case scenario as soon as it happens. And it's it's been like that for us, obviously, the same way. And our oldest daughter's in college. She just came home for the summer, but before she went back after winter break, she was so stressed out over everything that she actually got up to have breakfast in the morning and passed out, and we had to take her to the hospital. And that was, I don't think since JC, have been that scared in my life. I don't think that I've screamed that loud for my wife to come out of the bedroom as she's on the floor. And that whole situation, in my mind, I'm still trying to say, okay, it's fine, you're going to be fine, you're going to go back to school, everything's going to be okay. But you are just in that, you're in that zone. You are forever changed for the rest of your life. And it goes along with all the memes that we see of the kids that say, hey, my hair grew back, I'm done with chemo, I rang the bell. But I still am going to checkups every month or every 3 months. And for the rest of my life, I'm still going to be looking over my shoulder. And it's just the way that it is. And that was part of, too, you mentioned the beyond the five. That's part of that beyond the five, because we have to look past saying that at 5 years, you're cancer free, you're cured, you're go live your life, everything is fine. But you are still dealing with, at such a young age, at a young child that is going through these treatments, what these chemos or what these therapies will do to them, that they may possibly, almost more than likely, deal with later on in life. We very early on, we were told she's probably going to lose her hearing, she won't be able to have kids, her hair is obviously going to fall out, her heart and lungs, like they do testing before they go through the chemo to
Mm-hmm.
get a baseline to say this is how much it's going to destroy moving forward. For JC, she's like, yeah, whatever, if I can't have kids, I'll just adopt. And that was just her 8-year-old mind saying, this is how I'm going to deal with it. When her hair fell out, she came out of the shower and she gave it to me and said, and walked away. I ended up as a puddle on the floor, because that was when I really felt that it became real to me.
Yes,
You know,
that's
that's that visual side.
yeah. It's not just hair. As a parent, and I've talked to other parents that we've met along the way. It's like that hair is it's the last, I guess, sign, or the last line of defense and protection against the looks, against the stares, against the pity, you know, parties that you get in public. Because at that point in time, it's the public at that point in time, the outside world can tell that that child is sick because that child has no hair, whether that's a little girl or a little boy, kind of thing. I mean, yes, little boys shave their heads during the summer, but they're never like, they don't ever get that bald. At least not that I mean, yes, they cut their hair short. Good for them. But there's a difference between a well, healthy child with a summer haircut versus a sick child, with no hair, whether that's a girl or a boy. Um, and then people don't pay attention. Like, she could be out there wearing, and we would get, well, what does he want? Or how is, where did he go? And it's like, well, it would be one of those, well, she's fine. She would, like, and then that look of crap, I just made a huge mistake, and then of course you're just walking through the mall and you get those pity looks. And we've, we've learned to put on a mask. In the outside world, we've learned who we can take that mask off with and be real, whether we've met them or not. I know, going into your lives, it can be fun, it can be serious, it can be, but it's real. I can't do that with all of my friends, because even though we've been friends forever, they aren't on this side. They're not on, they're not a member of this club that nobody wants to be a part of. So it's just, they're not going to understand, that when she had another nosebleed in September, they're not going to understand the fear of that nosebleed, that somebody who has been through it. We reconnected with another family from our hometown during one of our inpatient stays, and her story started with a nosebleed. And so I sent her a message, like, she sent me a message, just happened to be that day, and she's like, hey, how are y'all doing? And I was like, well, I've had to call clinic twice because of a nosebleed. And even though it was over text, I could immediately read the empathy and even the fear in her response, because she knows that we started with a nosebleed and they started with a nosebleed. And there's just that immediate, like, oh shit, moment, you know, even on a text response, kind of thing. So it's not a club that anybody wants to be in, but the people on the inside are most of the time people that you can fall back on. They'll carry those buckets back into that fire when you're in the middle of it, even after they've come out, or even as they're going through their own fire.